as he humiliated her. These are the people that he decided to release in the streets of D.C. So if anybody does need to clean up D.C., I would agree it is this man, because he is the one that is causing half the crime that we have. Not only is he participating in the crime, but we know that he instigated the insurrection. And if I did say that I had one issue with the Biden-Harris administration, it is the fact that they did not move forward and make sure that this man was put where he should have been put. Because the last time I checked as a criminal defense attorney, and Mr. Attorney General, you may have a different experience, but I never had a defendant that had 34 convictions for felonies and did not spend one day in jail. Never in my life. And the last time I checked, the party of law and order is the only one that decided that they would be out of order and decided to nominate someone who was not only indicted but was actually convicted of multiple felonies. That has never happened in this country, and it is a shame that we are dealing with it now, and now he wants to tell y'all how to do your jobs.
In this hearing, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett pressed Attorney General Garland with a straightforward test: lawful or lawless? The answers were as stark as they were alarming. Ignoring court orders? Lawless. Impounding congressional funds? Illegal. Revoking birthright citizenship? Unconstitutional. Violating free speech? Lawless. And as Congressman Bill Pascrell emphasized earlier, these are not abstract debates. They are real violations we have witnessed under Donald Trump's leadership and Republican protection. When Crockett listed the pardons of violent offenders, sex predators, and insurrectionists, the hypocrisy of a party branding itself as the champion of law and order was laid bare. This is not simply partisan sparring. It is an examination of whether those in power will honor the Constitution or shred it for political gain.
A lot to cover, so I'm starting with the AG. I want you to tell me whether or not it's lawful or lawless, ignoring court orders.
That's lawless.
Impounding congressional funds.
Violates the law.
Invoking emergency powers when there is no emergency.
Unlawful.
Sending troops without an invite.
Violates the law.
Covering for pedophiles. I just threw that one in there. Okay, I'll move to the next one. What about revoking birthright citizenship?
Violates the 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
How about violating due process?
Violates the 5th and 14th Amendment of the Constitution.
How about what we see happening with redistricting that would in some way minimize, if not delete, the voices of people of color as they are going through and illegally going through this process? Is there a constitutional amendment that you can think of that is associated with that?
Probably many, but it is unlawful and unconstitutional and un-American.
Thank you. As well as, can you tell me if it is lawful or lawless to violate free speech?
That's lawless.
Okay, sounds about right, because, you know, we had to have a conversation about Jimmy Kimmel, so I'm going to say free Jimmy Kimmel for sure, and hopefully we will deal with the FCC chairman. But the reason that I wanted to go through that long list, and that was actually not even the half of it, is because since this administration has come in on January 20th, they have engaged in some form of every single thing that I said on that list, even the part about covering for pedophiles. So my question is, why are we sitting here today? Number one, they already passed their bootleg laws, and it's clear that even the bill author is not well informed about what his bill does. Because as has already been stated, at the age of 18, you are an adult. So this idea that somehow 21-year-olds were now somehow juveniles under DC law, is that accurate or inaccurate?
It was inaccurate, misunderstood the way the law works.
Correct. Could not understand how to read the law and decided that they were going to rewrite the law and mess up the law. And to be clear, we were talking about judges being able to have enough discretion to decide whether or not they were going to give someone an opportunity maybe to clean their record, such as the bill author was given that opportunity under Florida law because his second felony was picked up when he was 21, to be clear. So he was older than 18. And under this law, if you were under, 25, so 24 or under, then the judges had discretion, correct?
But only in certain kinds of cases, not the most serious cases. And in fact, that discretion was, as we know, exercised very rarely. And it would have been an opportunity had the Congress wanted to talk with the folks who are involved in applying that law and seeing how it works, to understand that this is not a law that's out of sync with other states, and it's working.
Thank you so much. And the reason that it matters is because now the gentleman from Florida is trying to become a governor, and chances are maybe D.C., once they get statehood, could have had a future governor that had a second chance. But since they don't want other people to have chances that they've been given, they want to just pretend like they are bigger and better and badder than. So I will move on because I am frustrated that we are having this hearing when we know that this administration can't take care of their own business. As we know, they recently illegally bombed yet another Venezuelan boat, and we may be headed for a war. We know that this particular president has decided that he wants to shake down people as relates to the First Amendment, because he has filed not one lawsuit, not two lawsuits, but he has filed numerous lawsuits. He filed a lawsuit against the New York Times. He filed one against the Wall Street Journal, against CBS, against ABC, against the Des Moines Register. He is doing all of this because he wants to quash any speech that is not appreciative or lauding him, which is pretty much anything that's factual. So let's talk a few facts about these January 6th felons that should still be incarcerated because they went through the process, but because they were doing things on his behalf, of course, he wanted to let them go. So they released more than 1,000 people who participated in the insurrection on this government, many of whom who had previous criminal records, like Mr. Theodore Mendenforth, who was convicted of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child, or Mr. Peter Schwartz, who had 38 prior convictions, including one where he beat his wife by repeatedly punching and biting her. Trump also pardoned Mr. David Daniel, who was convicted of production and possession of child pornography. Trump also pardoned Mr. Daniel Ball, who, quote, threw an explosive device that detonated upon at least 25 officers during the Capitol riot. He also had a record for, quote, domestic violence by strangulation. I'm not done. Trump also pardoned Mr. Andrew Taki, who sent nudes to an undercover law enforcement officer who was posing as a 15-year-old girl. Mr. Casey Hopkins also received a pardon from Trump, and Mr. Hopkins was convicted of forcible rape. According to court records, he, quote, had forcible intercourse with the victim, choked her to the point of impairing her vision, banged her head into a wall, and urinated into the victim's mouth as he humiliated her. These are the people that he decided to release in the streets of D.C. So if anybody does need to clean up D.C., I would agree it is this man, because he is the one that is causing half the crime that we have. Not only is he participating in the crime, but we know that he instigated the insurrection. And if I did say that I had one issue with the Biden-Harris administration, it is the fact that they did not move forward and make sure that this man was put where he should have been put. Because the last time I checked as a criminal defense attorney, and Mr. Attorney General, you may have a different experience, but I never had a defendant that had 34 convictions for felonies and did not spend one day in jail. Never in my life. And the last time I checked, the party of law and order is the only one that decided that they would be out of order and decided to nominate someone who was not only indicted but was actually convicted of multiple felonies. That has never happened in this country, and it is a shame that we are dealing with it now, and now he wants to tell y'all how to do your jobs.
When you strip away the noise of partisan talking points, politics often comes down to a very basic test. Is it lawful or is it lawless? That was the framework Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett used when she questioned Attorney General Merrick Garland, and her line of questioning was as simple as it was devastating. She asked Garland, "Is ignoring court orders lawful?" His answer was blunt. Lawless. What about impounding congressional funds? Again, violates the law. Invoking emergency powers when there is no emergency? Unlawful. Sending troops without an invitation from local governments? Violates the law. Line by line, Crockett went down the list, not with hypothetical scenarios, but with real abuses we have already seen in recent years. And as she layered in more examples, the case became clearer. This isn't about isolated mistakes. It's a pattern of a political movement led by Donald Trump and shielded by Republicans in Congress that has treated the Constitution not as a binding document, but as an obstacle to be circumvented. Take the question of birthright citizenship. Garland didn't hedge. Revoking it violates the 14th Amendment. Yet Trump, during his presidency and again on the campaign trail, has promised exactly that. to erase the constitutional guarantee that every person born in the United States is a citizen. It is black-letter law, settled for more than a century, and yet it is still treated as a political talking point. That is lawless. Consider due process, guaranteed by both the 5th and 14th Amendments. Crockett asked directly, is violating due process lawful? Of course not. Yet under Trump, we saw repeated attempts to undermine judicial independence, attacks on judges who ruled against him, and efforts to deny defendants and immigrants alike the basic rights guaranteed under our system. Then came the question of redistricting, efforts to gerrymander districts in ways that minimize or outright erase the voices of communities of color. Crockett didn't need Garland to cite a single amendment. She knew, and he knew, that these practices cut against the very foundation of equal representation. The Equal Protection Clause, the Voting Rights Act, decades of precedent, all ignored in the pursuit of power. And then came perhaps the most memorable exchange. Crockett asked, is it lawful or lawless to violate free speech? Garland's answer, that's lawless. Crockett shot back with a quip that cut through the tension. Free Jimmy Kimmel. It was a pointed reminder that even late-night comedians have become targets of political retaliation, and that attempts to silence critics aren't hypothetical. They are happening in real time. But Crockett's point wasn't just to run down a checklist of violations. It was to illustrate something bigger. Since January 20th of this administration, nearly every abuse she listed has been committed. The so-called party of law and order has, in reality, embraced lawlessness. She drove that point home when she turned to legislation. Calling them bootleg laws, she exposed how Republican lawmakers are pushing bills they don't even understand. She highlighted the case of a Florida congressman, one who himself had benefited from a second chance under Florida law after a felony at age 21, yet now wants to deny that same opportunity to young people in the District of Columbia. Under D.C.'s law, judges had discretion to allow rehabilitation for defendants under 25 in certain nonviolent cases. It was a modest, reasonable reform, aligned with what many states already do. Yet the very lawmaker who once relied on judicial discretion now postures as tough on crime, erasing opportunities for others while conveniently forgetting his own past. That isn't justice. It's hypocrisy. And Crockett didn't stop there. She pointed to something even more alarming. This administration has already engaged in unauthorized military action, illegally bombing yet another Venezuelan boat, as she put it. This raises the specter of reckless escalation, of stumbling into war without authorization or accountability. That, too, is lawless. She then pivoted to Trump's war on the press. Not one lawsuit, not two lawsuits, she said, but multiple, against the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CBS, ABC, and even local outlets like the Des Moines Register. Why? Because Trump cannot tolerate speech that is factual but critical. That is an assault on the First Amendment. And when the Attorney General says plainly that violating free speech is lawless, the conclusion writes itself. But perhaps the most damning part of Crockett's commentary came when she talked about pardons. She reminded the committee and the American people that Trump didn't just pardon political allies. He pardoned dangerous individuals, people convicted of sexual assault, domestic violence, and child exploitation. She named them Theodore Mindendorf, convicted of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child; Peter Schwartz, with 38 prior convictions, including beating his wife; David Daniel, convicted of producing and possessing child pornography; Daniel Ball, who threw an explosive device at police officers during the Capitol riot and had a record of domestic violence by strangulation; Andrew Tackey, who sent nude photos to an officer posing as a 15-year-old; Casey Hopkins, convicted of forcible rape, choking a victim, slamming her head into a wall, and urinating on her. These are not minor offenses. These are not harmless mistakes. These are violent, predatory crimes, and Trump chose to unleash these individuals back into society. Crockett's message was blunt. If anyone is responsible for crime in Washington, it is the man who pardoned predators and insurrectionists, not the residents of D.C. And then she delivered one of the most striking observations. In her years as a defense attorney, she had never once seen a client with 34 felony convictions walk free without serving a day in jail. Yet Trump, convicted on multiple felony counts, continues to roam the country, not only free, but running for president. That double standard is staggering. This is why Crockett's questioning hit so hard, because at its core, it wasn't just about the Constitution in theory, it was about the Constitution in practice, about whether we are still a nation where the law applies equally to everyone, or whether we have accepted a system where power shields the powerful while the rest of us are held accountable. And here's where the Democratic argument becomes crystal clear. For years, Republicans have sold themselves as the defenders of law and order, but as Crockett demonstrated, they are not. They are the ones ignoring court orders, suppressing free speech, undermining due process, manipulating districts, pardoning predators, and attacking the press. They are not the party of law and order. They are the party of lawlessness. Even Congressman Bill Pascrell, who spoke earlier in the hearing, underscored this point. He reminded the room that Republicans talk endlessly about protecting children, but refuse to pass meaningful gun safety legislation. They posture about morality, but cover for predators. They talk about crime, but unleash convicted criminals onto the streets. The hypocrisy is not just staggering, it is dangerous. And so, Crockett closed with a reminder that should haunt every American. Donald Trump is not only a convicted felon, but the first major party nominee in American history to carry that distinction. The Republican Party chose him anyway. They elevated not just a flawed leader, but a man who embodies the very lawlessness they claim to oppose. This is the heart of the matter. The Constitution is not partisan. The Bill of Rights is not optional. Court orders are not suggestions. Yet we have one party treating all of these as inconveniences, while the other fights to preserve them. Crockett's rapid-fire questioning laid it out as clearly as anyone could. Lawful or lawless? The record speaks for itself. And here's the challenge. Democrats cannot afford to let this framing slip away, because the American people deserve to know that when Republicans say law and order, what they really mean is lawlessness and disorder, so long as it serves their leader. They deserve to know that the fight for free speech, due process, equal protection, and the rule of law is not abstract. It is here, it is now, and it is urgent.